I don't know, you just start making poses once you watch Jojo. Don't blame me for that. Anyways, if you can't tell, today I'm reviewing JoJo's Bizarre Adventure from 2012. This is the first 2 parts of its current 8-part manga series, which is Phantom Blood and Battle Tendency. If you're new to JoJo, all you need to know is that it's a bizarre adventure. It's really strange, and you really can't take it seriously. If you do, then you're probably not going to enjoy it as much. Like, for example, there's one time in the series where a guy turns his hand into a squirrel where it jumps off of his wrist and runs around eating people, killing people, and biting its way directly through a halfway robotic Nazi. It's pretty bizarre. These 26 episodes are broken down into 2 stories, both following the head of the wealthy Joestar family. Part 1 is set during the 1880s in Great Britain, and it begins as we see George Joestar's carriage accident. How many carriage accidents actually happened back then? Horses don't actively run into each other or run into walls. They don't really get distracted that easily. That's what people do. This accident was discovered by Dario Brando, who proceeded to rob them blind. Of course, George was simply passed out, waking up assuming that he was trying to help him instead of rob him. Little did Dario know that this robbery attempt would form a bond between their 2 families, whereas after his death, his son Dio Brando would be adopted by the Joestar family. Of course, George's son Jonathan takes after him in many ways, as where Dio takes after his father in many ways. They don't really get along too well, so part 1 is the conflict between these 2 sons. This second part takes a deeper look into the mystery of part 1, which was the dangerous artifact known as the Stone Mask. In part 2, there were these ancient vampires that got uncovered and brought back to life. These were the creators of this stone mask, and we get to see Jojo and his friends try and stop them to save the world. Phantom Blood revolves around the feud between Jonathan Joestar, the young heir of the wealthy Joestar family. He takes all of his family's wealth for granted, and he is very spoiled. On the opposite end of the spectrum, we have Dio Brando. He grew up in an abusive household with an alcoholic father. These characters not only play off of each other very well, with Jonathan being this very innocent and kind-hearted person, even though he takes everything for granted, and he's kind of a slob at times. We have on the other side of this coin, which is Dio Brando, who grew up in an environment which pushed him to do what it takes, to do what's necessary to advance in the world, whether he has to kill or deceive to do it. In other words, Dio is a total dick. We see him torturing animals and doing numerous other very cruel things that I will not spoil you on. Phantom Blood was easily my favorite part of this 2012 series. They did a really good job of building characters and conflict in the short amount of time they were given. Many people rag on Dio, saying that he's this generic villain that's out to conquer the world. This is true for many parts of JoJo, but not Phantom Blood. Dio Brando is a very intelligent and manipulative character, and his personality is a result of the poor conditions of his upbringing. Of course, once he is adopted into the Joestar family, he's going to work hard to gain the favor of George Joestar so that he can have a sizable inheritance. Of course, once other things come into play, such as supernatural powers, his personality also carried over to that, and the only reason why he even has the supernatural powers was as a last-ditch effort to save his own life. It's only after Dio gains these supernatural powers that he tries to dominate the world. And considering his personality type before even having these powers, it still sounds about right. Of course, I have to agree with many of the criticisms of his character after this point, but before it, I thought he was a pretty good character. As Phantom Blood continues and Dio gains his special powers, it moves away from this semi-sort of slice-of-life feel that the series has within its first few episodes, and more into a generic battle series type feel, where they go from location to location just fighting henchmen. The amount of detail given to side characters in these first 2 parts of JoJo range from moderate to bare bones, which in ways works with the scope of the story because they are not afraid to kill off any of these characters, so some of them aren't really around for that long. However, I think it would benefit the viewer if they spent more time with detailing these characters' personalities instead of spending it on these long-winded death speeches. I'm not sure if these death speeches were supposed to be dramatic, but I couldn't take them seriously. You'll have these long-winded speeches when a character is cut in half and should have been dead, and there are even times where a character will speak and he doesn't even have a body. How does that work? It's pretty bizarre. Sadly, looking at battle tendencies, they continue with this bare bones characterization where many of these people will only have one type of personality trait. Jonathan's grandson Joseph was a very underwhelming character considering the shadow cast by his grandfather. Now, Jonathan wasn't the most detailed character either, but his personality was aided by the characters around him and the conflict at hand. In Part 2 Battle Tendency, the conflict doesn't hit as close to home as it did within Phantom Blood. This second arc is basically Joseph and his friends fighting against this evil threat and trying to save the world. It's kind of generic by comparison. This second arc features a few of the characters carried over from Phantom Blood, the few that survived, as well as a few new faces. Caesar is easily the most detailed side character within these first two parts of Jojo. We see his history and we learn about his personality, and we learn what ties him to the plot. However, the remainder of these side characters and battle tendencies left much to be desired, especially when it came to the antagonists. These antagonists were ancient vampires known as the Pillar Men. They each represent one personality trait. Despite these antagonists having such shallow personalities, I felt that their motives were justified. Seeing as how they're vampires, their bodies are flawed. They cannot go out into the sunlight, and it's their objective to complete their body and rid themselves of that flaw. Moving on to the plot, I already covered much of this in the character section of this review, but I think it's safe to say that Phantom Blood easily eclipses battle tendency. It's easy to tell that when the series switches over to having more action, that the logic with the writing kinda takes a backseat. Whether you've seen the first Jojo OVAs or if you've never even seen Jojo at all, you've probably seen pictures and you're familiar with their abilities called the Stand, which is basically a creature or human-like figure which comes out of their body and fights for them. These are not present within these first two arcs. The techniques used in Phantom Blood and Battle Tendencies are called Hamon, which is this ability which draws power from the sun, and also these breathing techniques forcing the energy through the body of the character, and it is the only weakness that the Pillar Men have. It really reminds me of Ki from Fist of the North Star, but it can do a lot more things and they explain it a lot better. There's a lot more rules to it than this, but because there's so many rules to the Hamon and so many characteristics of it, it felt very pretentious. Like, the Hamon have varying characteristics which can make this unbelievable even considering that it's an anime power. There are times when it has characteristics of magnets where they can stick all of these leaves together and use it to glide away. There are times when it has electrical properties with non-conductive and conductive elements to that. There are times when they can use it to climb up walls, to use their hands to stick to stuff. They can use it to turn liquids into solids. Sometimes they will take their clothes and load it with oil or soap, and they will use that with the Hamon to turn it into solid objects against their enemy, or they can take a thread out of their clothing and use the Hamon with it, which give it the properties of a laser wire basically, even though a thread would break very easily. And considering that Hamon is only used within the first two arcs of Jojo, it felt very unnecessary and pretentious, especially when all of the time that they spent in describing this special ability could have been used to flesh out some of the characters. And despite the consistent, long-winded explanations of their abilities in combat, I still found many of the fights very enjoyable. This leads me to the conflict. Because the writers are not afraid to kill off any of these characters here, I really enjoyed many of these fights simply because I didn't always know who was going to win. Speaking of the conclusion, I don't think it's necessary that I say this, but there really is no conclusion because this is not a full story. It's only the first two parts of what is currently 8. Moving on to the visuals, it's obvious that they paid a lot of attention to detail when it came to the art style here. There's so much attention to style with the characters' clothing. They paid a lot of attention to detail with the surroundings as well, considering that this takes place in 2 different areas of the world at different times. They did a great job. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure features this wild color scheme where the characters' hair and clothing will change depending on the scene at hand. And I'm not sure why they do this exactly, because obviously the manga didn't have color. It could be attributed to the characters' moods, but I'm not sure about that. And they don't just do it here. I noticed that they do it in Stardust Crusader as well. I felt they did a great job with the animation as well during the fights, where characters are really moving around a lot. However, I did notice that there was a lot of the blurry lines behind characters, the movement lines as they were in combat, but I think this was intentional considering the fact that how I saw some parody aspects to JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Music is equally important as the visuals here. The first and second halves of this series were composed by two different artists, and you can actually tell the differences between them. However, I enjoyed them consistently, except for I felt the dubstep was a bit out of place in the second half. I watched the series with the Japanese audio, and I felt that the actors did a great job of fulfilling the roles that they had, because they exaggerated all of their lines, which was necessary for the characters they were playing. I tried to find information on an English dub of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, but all I found were articles saying that the DVD release would have an English dub, but I found no clips anywhere to test its quality. My final score of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is a 7.1 out of 10 with an enjoyment level of about a 7. One of the things that I enjoyed the most out of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure was the importance of style. Beautiful anime are about a dime a dozen nowadays, but it's rare that you find an anime that has panache. You could easily tell that the most important things to the creators of this anime, and probably the manga as well, was the attention to style and creating a quirky atmosphere, and it does a great job at that. While I probably don't enjoy this series as much as the next JoJo fan, I still recommend this to people who are just tired of the average battle shonen series, because this is technically classified as a shonen within these two parts here. I would also recommend this to someone who is looking for an action or a comedy, or really anyone that wants to see a different type of style with an anime in general. Furthermore, because of my experience with Stardust Crusader, the third part of the series, I'm actually enjoying that a lot more. I'm liking the fights a bit more, I'm liking the comedy a bit more, I love the art style to it, but the characters really aren't as detailed. I have to take that point away from it, but it's definitely worth watching this to get to that. So anyways, let me know your thoughts about JoJo's Bizarre Adventure in the comment section below. Be sure to check out my anime review playlist as well as my newly formed anime discussion playlist. Be sure to subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and also check out the Patreon if you'd like to support this channel. Thanks for watching and all of your support with the likes and comments, and I'll see you next time.